This was the moment that defined him for millions. A single kick, a single miss, and just like that, the hero became the villain. But that's not the real story. The real story is about a boy from Caldogno who fought through pain, pressure, and expectation, who carried a nation on his shoulders, and whose name should have been remembered in gold, not grief. Because before the world remembered him for that one moment, he gave them 1,000 others, moments of magic, of defiance, of grace, pain, and impossible beauty. From a land of warriors and defenders, he was an artist. This is the story of Roberto Baggio, the man who carried Italy and was left alone in the end. Italy has produced so many footballing legends through the years, but historically, they have been known as the nation for defenders. From Maldini to Baresi to Nesta and Cannavaro. But from a land of defenders rose one of the most prodigious attacking talents the sport had ever seen. This kid was born in Caldogno and started playing football in his local club at the age of 9, and at the age of 11, he had already been involved in 65 goals in just 26 games. 6 of those goals coming in a single game. Everyone who was tuned into grassroots football in Italy in the late 70s was already asking who this kid was. Really, who was this kid? Who was he? That kid was Roberto Baggio. And when he played, it was as if the game slowed down to watch. Every touch, every pass, every goal, a glimpse of something rare. He moved to Vicenza's youth team in 1980 at the age of 13 and was promoted to the first team at the age of 15, where he competed in the Serie C, the third tier of Italian football. Baggio's first goal in the Serie C came from the spot on the 3rd of June 1984. Little did the young teenager know that the penalty spot which opened his account would turn around and betray him at the end of his career. But for now, Baggio was still the most unplayable youngster in Italy. He was named best player in the Serie 1 in 1985, and the biggest clubs in the country were already fighting for his signature. He was destined for a move to a Serie A club that summer. In fact, he was scheduled to finalize a move to Fiorentina in 2 days before the worst imaginable thing happened. At the very end of the season, while attempting a slide tackle, Baggio ruptured the ACL and meniscus in his right knee. He was just 18 years old, and the doctors feared that he might never play football again. Baggio was distraught. His career was about to end before it had even started, and just before his big break too. It was the worst thing ever. But Fiorentina stood by him. Despite what the doctors said, they still went ahead to sign him and even paid for his surgery and rehabilitation. Which is why a bloody war broke out on the streets of Florence when Baggio ended up moving to Juventus some years later. We'll come to the war soon, but for now, Baggio was a Fiorentina player and everyone loved him. Until they didn't. He didn't play a single Serie A game in his first season at the club because of his long-term injury. He was signed in 1985, but had to wait a full year for his Serie A debut, which eventually came in September 1986. Everyone thought this was the start of a really beautiful story, but that same month, he made his Serie A and European debuts. He picked up another knee injury. This time around, he needed 220 stitches to practically rebuild his knee. And just like that, he was set to miss out on another full season. Fans started to get impatient. It felt like the club had just taken upon themselves nothing more than a recurring medical bill. Yes, he's a brilliant player. But what's the point of his brilliance if he's never fit enough to play? But Baggio focused on getting back to the pitch as quickly as possible, and that finally happened 8 months later in May 1987. And he came with a special gift for the fans. Baggio made his return against Diego Maradona's Napoli, the eventual winners of the Scudetto that year. Everyone expected Napoli to win comfortably, especially after they went 1-0 up, but Baggio scored a beautiful free-kick goal and managed to snatch a point for Fiorentina. That goal didn't just secure a point against the mighty Napoli, it also saved Fiorentina from relegation that year. That goal right there was the start of new things. After an injury-laden start to life at Fiorentina, Baggio finally began to get up to speed. Then, in the 1988-89 season, he exploded. He scored 15 Serie A goals and was the league's third highest goal scorer that season. He also helped Fiorentina finish 7th on the table, ultimately helping them secure a ticket to the UEFA Cup. Baggio quickly became known for his otherworldly creativity and composure in front of goal. Miguel Montuori, an Argentine-born Italian legend, declared that Baggio was even more productive than Maradona and crowned him the best number 10 in the league. That's how good Baggio was. Having helped them secure a spot in the UEFA Cup, Baggio then went on to lead Fiorentina to the final in 1990. It was in that campaign that he scored his first European goal, and again, it came from the penalty spot. Anyway, Fiorentina eventually lost to Juventus, and that was where the drama started. Not long after the UEFA Cup final, the world was shocked by one of the most controversial transfer moves in football history. Juventus had just signed Roberto Baggio from Fiorentina for £8 million, making him the most expensive player in football history at the time. The Fiorentina fans could not believe it, and they were completely irate. After all the club had done for him, how could he dare do that? Not to just leave, but to join a rival. Come on. Now, for those who don't know, Juventus and Fiorentina are bitter rivals. You see, in 1982, Juventus beat Fiorentina to the Scudetto on the last day of the season, no thanks to a series of controversial refereeing decisions. From that moment on, Fiorentina fans hated the sight of Juventus. When they signed Baggio in 1985, it was a sweet victory because Juventus had previously shown interest in the youngster. But in the summer of 1990, it felt like they lost twice 2 trophies to their bitter rivals, one the UEFA Cup and the other, Roberto Baggio. After news of this transfer became public, riots broke out on the streets of Florence. There were bricks and chains being thrown, and it was so bad that the Fiorentina president, Flavio Pontello, had to lock himself in the stadium because he feared for his life. But the riot raged on in the streets of Florence, leaving 50 people injured. 9 persons were eventually arrested in the aftermath of the rampage. Things got so bad that Baggio had to come out and say that he didn't really want to join Juventus, but he was forced to accept the move by the Fiorentina president. But that didn't stop him from getting whistled and booed when he first returned to Florence in the white and black of Juventus. But that day, he did something that instantly won back the hearts of the Fiorentina faithful. In that game, he won a penalty for Juventus, but despite being the club's designated penalty taker, he refused to take that particular kick. He would later say it was because the goalkeeper knew him too well, but everyone knew the real reason. He just could not bring himself to score against a club he still loved so deeply. The Juventus coach didn't like that, so he took Baggio off, and his replacement went on and missed the penalty, and Juventus eventually lost the game. But the biggest image of that match came when Baggio was walking to the bench after he had been taken off. A Fiorentina scarf had been thrown onto the pitch and he picked it up and held onto it. Now, that right there was an image which stuck. The gesture was loved by the Fiorentina fans, and they started to love him again, but the Juventus fans did not appreciate it at all. In fact, at the next training session, there were about 300 Juventus supporters there to give Baggio a piece of their minds. It would take some time, but Baggio was eventually able to draw the Juventus fans in with his consistently great performances. He didn't just prove himself at Juventus, he carried them. In 1993, he led the club to a UEFA Cup title, scoring twice and assisting once in the final. That season, he scored 39 goals in all competitions. It wasn't just redemption, it was domination. That year, he was crowned Balón d'Oro winner and FIFA World Player of the Year.
And the well-deserved world champion player of 1993.
The ultimate recognition of his genius. Now, he may not have been loved by all the fan bases in the Italian league, but each time Roberto Baggio donned the blue of Italy, he had every Italian's full backing because he was easily the country's biggest export. He went to his first World Cup with Italy in 1990 on home soil and was a real delight for the home fans. In his first competitive game for Italy against Czechoslovakia, he scored what turned out to be the goal of the tournament and the 7th best goal in World Cup history, according to a FIFA poll. In the round of 16 against Uruguay, he scored from a free kick, but the goal was disallowed. Then in the quarter-final against the Republic of Ireland, he scored again, but his goal was wrongly disallowed for offside. They reached the semis where they faced Argentina. Both teams were inseparable, despite Baggio coming off the bench and nearly winning it from a free kick, so the game was decided on penalties. Baggio stepped up and converted his kick, but Italy eventually lost. They were going to beat England in the third-place match to secure bronze. In that game, Baggio, who was Italy's designated set-piece taker, gave up a penalty for his teammate Schillaci, who was chasing the Golden Boot. A gesture which was well received and commended by fans and the media. So, you see, up until this point, Baggio's interaction with the penalty spot had always been cordial. He loved the spot, and the spot loved him back. But all of that changed in the United States in 1994. Now more mature, a much better player, and even a Balón d'Or winner, Baggio almost entirely shouldered Italy's hopes of doing well at the 1994 World Cup. He was the nation's top scorer in the qualifiers and was set to be their most important player at the tournament. But with the World Cup just months away, Baggio started to struggle with injuries, which struck fear into the hearts of the Italians. But despite not being a 100% fit, Baggio still put Italy on his back.
Speri di non indebolire la squadra.
È una battuta. Visto che la squadra va benissimo, spero che con il mio rientro continui su questa strada.
He started the tournament rather shaky though, and it affected Italy's form. They won just one game in the group stage and finished third, only advancing to the next round by virtue of being the 4th best third-placed team. But in the knockout rounds, the Divine Ponytail, as he was now called because of his eccentric hairstyle, woke up. He scored 2 goals against Nigeria in the round of 16 to drag them into the quarter-finals against all odds. You see, in that game, Nigeria had taken the lead in the 26th minute, and the Italians were finding it hard to come back. Their job became even more difficult when Gianfranco Zola got sent off in the 76th minute. But Baggio arose and got an equaliser in the 89th minute, then went on to settle things from the penalty spot in extra time. He scored another late winner against Spain in the quarter-final, this one coming in the 88th minute of the game to give Italy another 2-1 win. Then he completed his carry job by scoring 2 goals in another 2-1 win in the semi-final against Bulgaria. This time around though, both goals came early in the 20th and 25th minutes. So, with 5 goals in the knockout rounds, Baggio successfully carried Italy to the World Cup final for the first time in 12 years. He also finished with the 2nd highest number of goals at the tournament. The final was against Brazil, so it was always going to be difficult. This was a battle of who would be the first nation to ever win 4 World Cups and become the outright most successful nation in the competition's history. Both teams wanted it so bad, which made for a very interesting build-up to the game. But a game that was already difficult on its own became even more difficult for Italy when news broke that Roberto Baggio would not be fully fit for the final in California, because he had pulled his hamstring in the semis, but he didn't want to let his teammates and his country down, so he insisted on playing with the help of painkiller injections. Of course, he wasn't his usual self in that game, but Baggio still managed to create chances and threaten the Brazil goal. But despite all efforts, neither he nor the Brazil contingents could do anything in 120 minutes. The game ended 0-0, so things had to be decided on penalties. Franco Baresi and Marcio Santos missed the first penalties for Italy and Brazil respectively. Then both sides went on to convert each of their next 2 penalties. But then Massaro missed for Italy and Dunga scored for Brazil, putting a lot of pressure on Baggio as he stepped up to take Italy's 5th penalty. If he scored, Brazil would have to score their next penalty to win the World Cup. If he missed, it was over. But this was Italy's best penalty taker and best player overall, so everyone expected him to convert from the spot. As he walked up to the 18-yard box with his ponytail swinging from left to right with every step he took, he must have been aware of how important this particular kick was for him and every Italian watching, but he perhaps had no idea how much it would shape the entire worldview of him. Baggio placed the ball down on the spot, walked backwards, and without wasting much time, jogged towards the ball and sent it sailing over the crossbar. It was all over. That miss confirmed Brazil as world champions. Baggio stayed rooted to the spot for 8 minutes with his head down after his miss. He stood there, staring at the grass as the world around him exploded in celebration. The cameras zoomed in, the headlines were already being written, and in that moment, football didn't feel like a game. It felt like a funeral. That image, Baggio, alone, head down, under the Californian sun, became the defining snapshot of his career. They called him the man who died standing, and in many ways, he did. Baggio has since come out to say that that was the worst moment of his career, and he still dreams about it till this day.
Un desiderio da esaudire nel mondo del calcio, cancellare il 17 luglio 94.
That year, he would end up with the World Cup silver ball and a 2nd place finish at the Balón de Oro, but none of that did anything to assuage the ache in his heart. It also did nothing to stop the world from blaming him for Italy's loss. It didn't matter that he had almost single-handedly dragged Italy to the final. It didn't matter that he was the tournament's 2nd best player. It didn't matter that 2 others missed their penalties before him. All the world saw was his miss, and in their eyes, that made him the villain. The miss didn't just haunt him, it lingered. He returned to club football with doubts swirling. Could he still lead? Still matter? 2 years later, he answered. He would go on to win the Scudetto with Milan in 1996, but because of his falling out with the Italy manager, Baggio did not go to the Euros that year. He would return to the national team under Cesare Maldini, leading them to the World Cup in 1998. In the opening game against Chile, Italy won a penalty. And despite the trauma of 1994, Baggio had the mental strength to step up, and he converted the kick, his first goal from the penalty spot for Italy since the miss in the final. In Baggio's words, that goal was liberating. In 1998, Italy's tournament was once again decided on penalties, this time in the quarterfinals against host nation France. Baggio stepped up first this time around and converted his kick, but it wasn't enough as Italy lost and were knocked out. Despite that sad day in 1994, real fans remember Roberto Baggio as one of the greatest players of his generation. He is Italy's all-time top scorer at the World Cup and the only Italian to score in 3 different World Cup tournaments. And it is pretty sad that many remember him by that one missed penalty, because he is actually one of the greatest penalty takers in football history, with a conversion rate of 85%, better than that of both Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Roberto Baggio scored 108 of the 127 penalties he took, the best conversion rate in the history of Italian football. In fact, that penalty miss in the 1994 World Cup final was the only one he ever missed during a penalty shootout. He is Serie A's 7th all-time top scorer and 4th for most free kicks. He is also the 4th highest scoring Italian in football history. The Divine Ponytail was a once-in-a-generation player, graceful, fearless, unforgettable, and true football lovers will always remember him that way. Today, Roberto Baggio lives far from the spotlight. After retiring from football, he turned down coaching and punditry offers, choosing a quiet life instead. He resides in the countryside with his family, spending his days farming, hunting, and living simply. No cameras, no press, just peace. For a man who once carried the weight of a nation, it's a life of stillness he never had on the pitch.